The piece was published 196 years ago, and it's still a pleaser. Our sermon this morning it's been with me and stewing inside me for a very long time, and so many things have fueled my perspective on this topic. Some of it started with a young college student who was preparing for an audition and was paying attention to the big things, but was not taking advantage of the small details, the small, easy opportunities to prepare themselves. And it is so much like it in life. What's the term? Desperate times come for desperate measures. And we think we need big results. We must do big things. And yet sometimes when I approach projects, I say, leave no stone unturned, even if that means also the smallest pebbles. And so this sermon is really about those small pebbles and how important they are, and sometimes how we take them for granted or doubt their value. But the scripture this morning comes from the Apostle Paul's letters, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 10. I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree with one another in what you say, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly united in mind and thought. It says, Dear Paul, thank you so much for your letter. We will get to that right away. Yes, signed, your faithful Corinthians. Now, the Corinthians in Corinth, Greece, the congregants in Corinth, Greece, may have come together through Paul's shared teachings of Jesus, but they definitely remained deeply divided as Roman citizens, ethnic Greeks, and Jews who additionally separated themselves over social standing and wealth. And to me, it doesn't seem that people haven't changed that much since Paul's time. But this story from 1720 gives some hope. A kindly old stranger was walking through the land when he came upon a village. And as he entered, the villagers moved to their homes, locking the doors and windows behind them. The stranger smiled and called out, Why are you all so frightened? I'm a simple traveler, looking for a soft place to stay for the night and a warm place for a meal. There's not a bite to eat in the whole province, someone cried from behind a shuttered window. We are weak and our children are starving. You better keep moving on. Oh, I have everything I need, said the stranger. In fact, I was thinking of making some stone soup to share with all of you. He pulled an iron cauldron from his cloak, filled it with water, and began to build a fire underneath. Then, with great flair, he produced
a purple silk bag, withdrew an ordinary looking stone and ceremoniously dropped it into the water. Upon the prospect of food, some of the villagers cautiously came out of their homes, while some continued to watch from their windows. As the stranger sniffed the broth and smacked his lips, their hunger began to overcome their fear. "Ah," the stranger declared to no one in particular, "I do like a tasty stone soup. Of course, stone soup with cabbage, now that's hard to beat." Soon a villager approached hesitantly, holding a small cabbage he'd received from its hiding place, and he added it to the pot. "Wonderful," cried the stranger. "You know, I once had stone soup with cabbage and a bit of salt beef, and it was fit for a king." Inspired, the village butcher managed to find some salt beef, and so it went with an onion, a few carrots, a pair of potatoes, mushrooms, and so on, until there was indeed a delicious meal for everyone in the village to share. The next morning, the village elder approached and offered the stranger a great deal of money for this magic stone, but the stranger refused and began gathering his things to travel on. As he left, the stranger came upon a group of children standing near the road. He gave the silk bag with the stone to the youngest child there and whispered to the group of children, "It was not the stone, but you villagers who performed the magic. See what else you can do." Now, there are many morals to this story. One they probably didn't count on, and they certainly didn't mention when I was in grade school, is with just the right amount of cunning and fraud, you too can get a free meal. Seriously and obviously, the answer is we can create more good together than separately. Less obviously, but more importantly, at least for the context of my sermon this morning, never devalue or discount the small good you might be able to contribute. With a somewhat Buddhist add-on, and can we be satisfied with that? Knowing that we can only contribute a small amount of good, can we be personally and spiritually satisfied with that? When I was a young metaphysician, one day during meditation, this voice popped into my head: "You must be content being a drop in the bucket." Sobering words for a young performing artist who also dreamed of being a prominent university music professor someday. But I kept those words in mind, and I tried to take them in heart, even when wrestling with my personal drive to achieve important and significant things in my life. And this was well before the internet began telling the world that with just the right filters, just the right meme or catchphrase, we could all be famous. We can all really matter. Not for doing anything beneficial in the world, but still, we can all matter. The more time I've spent on this planet, and I've shared this before in some of my sermons, I remain disheartened, dismayed by how easy it is for a single person to do great harm. But for a single person to bring an equivalent amount of good, I'm hard-pressed to find many examples. And as Paul desperately urged in the story of Stone Soup illustrates, significant good happens when people come together. I'm especially taken by the lesson underneath this old tale. The townspeople had a scarcity mindset, did they not? Because of this, they didn't think their meager assets were worth sharing. Eventually, that scarcity mindset led to isolation, and they became fearful of outsiders. By the time the stranger arrives in the story, they have become blind to their own collective abundance and its potential. Metaphysically, they have lost their collective consciousness. Now, this broaches one of the challenges metaphysicians deal with as a people of faith. We believe that we are co-creators, and we accept personal responsibility for what we have manifested and what we hope to manifest in our lives. And we know that it's our inherent connection to the divine that enables all of that. And yet, because so much of it remains a beautiful mystery, we sometimes doubt the significance of our power, its power, and our ability to manifest its greatness beyond the confines of our singular lives. A sociology professor in college offered this to our class, and it has stuck with me ever since. When people are afraid, they feel isolated. They then, as a survival mechanism, lump things into categories as threatening and non-threatening. And the need to justify this fear can then lead them to lean into those differences. Suddenly, safe versus unsafe leads to right, wrong, good, bad. This, in turn, compounds the isolation, which entrenches the value and the high stakes of all those perceived differences. And as someone who's guilty of this type of self-sorting for survival's sake himself, I get overwhelmed thinking, how can I, as one man, honestly make a dent in these mighty walls apparently dividing the entire world these days? So the news cycles and internet algorithms seem to tell me. Social divides can seem like ravines, but they can be bridged. And I believe we best build those bridges when we do so without the intent of benefiting from the bridge. I dare say, I believe bridges can be built with a mere drop in the bucket. This summer, I completed a formal Lakota Vision Quest ceremony where I spent 4 days and 3 nights on a mountain, confined to a space the size of a queen-size bed. And I was allowed to wear a pair of shorts, but no shoes, no shirt. I had no tent, no food, and I would have no water. The Lakota do not mess around. I was, in essence, left alone with myself and my thoughts for 4 days and 3 nights. And on the second day, I woke up a little hungry and somewhat thirsty. And while collecting myself to face the long day alone, I noticed hanging off the tip of a leaf on one of the small trees bordering my space was a single drop of water, shining in the morning sun. It was just one drop, and as ludicrous as the idea felt to me, especially in the context of 3 more days and 2 more nights to go, I leaned forward, opened my mouth, and took in that single drop of water. And honestly, to my total surprise, that single drop awakened the tip of my tongue and revived my entire mouth. Oh yes, I was to take in many more droplets that morning, but it only took one for me to experience the absolute power of a single drop of water. And it dawned on me that we can't know what a single drop of water or some tiny gesture of kindness could do to someone. And we don't need to know. All this time I've been waiting for some stranger or some leader to show up and tell me which pot to put my drop in. Or I've been waiting for a collective good to assemble and create stone soup together. And I realized in that moment what was really going on was that I lacked faith in the magic, to borrow the stranger's words. The bucket is the world. The time is now. The time is always now. That is why out in the world, drops in the bucket are so powerful. As simple as acknowledging a shared common love of Ben and Jerry's in the checkout line, one sentence, a modest smile, and that's it. Rooting for a passing jogger, complimenting someone's dog. So often we're worried about the big walls which seem to be in our faces all days in the news cycle, but we can ignore those, we can bypass them. Walls are human constructions and they're not infinite. There are small bridges and small ways around them. Again, a modest smile, rooting for a passing jogger, complimenting someone's dog on the sidewalk. Because when people feel connected, they feel safe. And when they feel safe, They come from behind their barricade, and they look at the other person who's come out from behind their barricade, and they begin again to see some common ground, no matter how small. And they start to move together and forward. Paul's plea to Corinth, all of you agree with one another in what you say. There be no divisions among you. You be perfectly united in mind and thought. Perfectly united in mind and thought. I don't know if that's possible. Is it even necessary? How about perfectly united in spirit and heart? And to get there, when you have the means to contribute, a quarter cup, a pint, please do so. But never pass the chance to go with a single drop of kindness or connection. Create just a tiny moment of unity, one that you may not even see, much less benefit from. Today, I am a mighty drop in the bucket. I hope you will be a mighty drop in the bucket.